I raised my son, Michael, alone in America. His father left when Michael was barely old enough to understand what goodbye meant. One day there were 2 coffee cups on the kitchen counter, and the next day there was only 1. From that moment on, every bill, every decision, every fear became mine to carry. I worked long hours, sometimes 2 jobs at once, cleaning offices at night and helping at a small store during the day. I learned how to stretch dollars until they felt thin as paper. I skipped new clothes, skipped rests, skipped dreams, all so my son could have what he needed. After years of saving, I bought a small blue house on a quiet street. It was not big, but it was ours. The paint peeled near the windows, and the floor creaked when you walked across the living room, but it was warm and steady. That house saw Michael take his first steps, lose his first tooth, and graduate from high school. Every corner held a memory. I believed that house was proof that love and effort could build something lasting. Michael grew into a kind man. When he told me he was getting married, I cried the kind of tears that come from pride and relief. I thought maybe all those hard years were worth it. His fiancée was named Lauren. When I first met her, she smiled politely and spoke softly. She dressed well and carried herself with confidence. Her family had money. They talked about investments, properties in Europe, and connections I did not understand. I listened more than I spoke. I never felt less than them, but I could feel the distance. The wedding was planned quickly and on a scale far bigger than anything I had imagined. The venue was a rented estate outside the city, with long white curtains, shining floors, and staff everywhere. I offered to help however I could. Folding programs, arranging flowers, watching over small details. Lauren thanked me, but her eyes often slid past me, like I was part of the background. The night before the wedding, the house was full of noise. Laughter echoed through the halls, music played softly, and glasses clinked as people celebrated. I sat quietly in a corner, watching my son laugh with his friends. I felt happy and strangely out of place at the same time. Late that evening, Lauren asked if she could speak with me alone. Her voice was calm, almost sweet. She led me to a guest room at the end of the hall. The room smelled faintly of flowers and new fabric. The door closed behind us with a soft click. She stood near the window, arms crossed, and looked at me carefully. Then she said words I will never forget. "After tomorrow, you are not part of this family anymore." For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood. My heart started pounding and my ears rang. I asked her what she meant. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. She said her family valued image and status. She said I did not fit into the future she imagined. She called me simple. She said my presence made her parents uncomfortable. She said Michael would have a new life now, and I needed to step aside quietly. I felt something inside me break. Not loudly but deeply. I tried to speak, but my voice felt trapped in my chest. She thanked me for raising Michael and said that was enough. Then she opened the door, as if the conversation was finished. I walked back to my room in silence. The hallway lights felt too bright. I closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed. I did not cry at first. I stared at the wall, replaying her words over and over. I thought about the nights I stayed awake worrying about rent. The times I went to work sick, I could not afford to miss a shift. The sacrifices no one ever saw. When the tears came, they did not stop. I cried until my chest hurt and my eyes burned. I prayed quietly, not for revenge but for strength. By morning I had made a decision. I would not attend the wedding. Before sunrise I packed my small bag. I left a simple note for Michael, saying I loved him and wished him happiness. I did not explain more. I did not want to cause chaos. I walked out of the grand house quietly, like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. The drive back to my blue house felt longer than usual. The streets were empty, and the sky was just beginning to lighten. When I unlocked my front door, the familiar smell of home wrapped around me. I sat at the kitchen table and held my coffee with shaking hands. I felt invisible but also strangely calm. I believed staying away was the kindest thing I could do. By late morning my phone began to buzz. Messages. Missed calls stacked one after another. I did not answer. My heart told me something was wrong, but I was too tired to face it. Around noon I finally picked up my phone. The wedding had been cancelled. I sat there in silence, not knowing that my absence had already started something far bigger than I could imagine. At first, no one told me why the wedding stopped. I only knew it had been cancelled because my phone would not stop vibrating on the kitchen table. Messages appeared one after another, each sharper than the last. Lauren's mother wrote that I had humiliated their family. One of Lauren's cousins accused me of turning my son against his own future. Someone else claimed I had demanded money and threatened to ruin the ceremony if I did not get it. I read every message slowly, my hands cold, my stomach tight. None of it was true, yet the words felt heavy, like stones being piled on my chest. I tried calling Michael. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again, then again. No answer. That silence hurt more than the accusations. I could handle strangers being cruel, but the thought that my son might believe them made it hard to breathe. I left him a short message, telling him I loved him and that I was here whenever he wanted to talk. I did not defend myself. I did not explain. I hoped he knew me well enough to see the truth. The next 2 days passed in a blur. Barely slept. I walked from room to room in my small blue house, touching the walls, the door frames, the table where Michael used to do his homework. I kept asking myself how everything had turned so ugly so fast. I wondered if I had made a mistake by staying away. I wondered if my silence was making things worse. Still, something deep inside told me to wait. On the third morning there was a knock at my door. It was firm, not angry but serious. When I opened it, a woman stood on the porch holding a folder against her chest. She was around my age, dressed simply with kind but tired eyes. She introduced herself as Claire and said she worked at a private financial office in the city. She asked if she could come in. My heart started racing, but I stepped aside and let her enter. We sat at the kitchen table. Claire opened her folder and took a deep breath. Then she asked me a question that made my head spin. She asked if I knew that my son's name had been used in several loan applications totaling more than $500,000. For a moment I could not speak. The room felt like it was tilting. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself and told her no. I knew nothing about any loans. Claire nodded, as if she expected that answer. She explained slowly, choosing her words with care. She said the applications were prepared to be finalized immediately after the wedding. The money was meant to be used to buy property in Europe. She said Lauren and her father were listed as planners, but Michael was the one whose credit and future income were being used. If anything went wrong, the debt would fall on him alone. Felt sick. Images of Michael working, saving, trying to build a future flashed through my mind. The idea that he could be trapped in debt he did not fully understand made my chest ache. I asked Claire how she found me. She told me that while reviewing old records connected to the loan, my name appeared. Decades ago, I was listed as the owner of the house where Michael grew up. That house had recently been mentioned as potential collateral. I told her that it was impossible. I had never agreed to that. Claire said she believed me. She explained that something about the paperwork felt wrong, which is why she decided to dig deeper instead of approving the loans right away. She wanted to warn someone who might still be able to stop it. After Claire left, I sat alone for a long time. The kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I felt angry, scared, and strangely clear at the same time. The pieces were starting to fit together. The sudden wedding. Pressure. The way Lauren spoke to me the night before. It was never just about love or family. It was about money. That evening, I pulled out every document I had saved over the years. I spread them across the dining table. Deeds, bank statements, letters, old emails. I had always been careful. Being a single mother taught me that paperwork could protect me when people failed to. As I sorted through everything, I remembered something important. Years ago, after Michael turned 18, I had placed the house into a small trust. It was simple but strong. The house was meant for Michael alone, protected from future spouses unless certain conditions were met. I did it quietly without drama, because I wanted him to always have a safe place, no matter what life threw at him. I never imagined it would matter this much. Lauren never knew about the trust. The next day, the accusations grew louder. Someone posted online that I was a bitter woman who could not let go of her son. Others shared lies about secret demands and hidden fights. I did not respond. I did not argue. I focused on gathering facts, not opinions. Late that night my phone rang. It was Michael. His voice sounded tired and confused. He asked me if any of what they were saying was true. I told him no. I told him I loved him. I told him I would explain everything when he was ready to listen. There was a long pause. Then he said he needed time. When the call ended, I felt tears slide down my face, but I did not wipe them away. I knew now that silence was not weakness. It was space. Space for the truth to surface. Space for lies to collapse under their own weight. I did not know exactly how everything would come out, but I knew one thing for sure. I would not let my son's life be built on deception. And I would not let my years of quiet sacrifice be turned into a weapon against me. I asked Michael to meet me at a public office downtown, a quiet building where people handled paperwork and spoke in careful voices. I chose that place because I wanted witnesses, not drama. I wanted facts, not raised voices. When he walked in, my heart sank. He looked exhausted, like someone who had not slept in days. His shoulders were tense, his eyes guarded. Lauren was not with him, and that alone told me something had already begun to crack. We sat across from each other at a small table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I looked at my son and saw the little boy who used to run into the house after school, dropping his backpack by the door. I wanted to reach out and hold his hand, but I stayed still. This was not the moment for comfort. This was the moment for truth. I slowly placed the documents on the table between us. The loan applications came first. Pages and pages filled with numbers, signatures, and plans. Then I showed him the emails. Messages discussing timing, the wedding, and how everything would be easier once he was legally tied to Lauren. Finally, I showed him the trust documents for the house. I explained what they were and why I created them years ago. Michael's face changed as he read. The color drained from his skin. His hands began to shake. He looked up at me, his eyes wide, and whispered that he did not know it had gone this far. He said Lauren told him it was normal. She said her family handled finances this way. She said I was too emotional about money and that I did not understand how wealthy families operated. He admitted that she pressured him to keep secrets. She told him I was controlling and jealous. She said the house should be shared after marriage, that it was unfair for me to hold on to something that could benefit them. He believed her when she said everything was legal and safe. He never imagined it could become a fraud. Listening to him speak felt like being cut open slowly. I was hurt, yes, but more than that, I was afraid for him. Afraid of how close he came to losing everything he worked for. I told him I did not blame him for trusting the woman he planned to marry. I blamed the people who used that trust as a weapon. After the meeting, Michael asked for time to think. I agreed. I watched him walk out of the building, his steps heavy, his head down. I sat there alone for a long while, staring at the empty chair across from me, wondering how love could be twisted so easily. Later that same day, the story changed publicly. Lauren's family began speaking loudly and often. They told people I sabotaged the wedding because I could not let go of my son. They said I was bitter, jealous, and angry about being replaced. They painted me as a poor woman grasping at control because I had nothing else. I heard about it through messages and calls from distant relatives and old friends. Some asked gently if it was true. Others did not ask at all. They assumed. I did not defend myself. I had learned by then that shouting into lies only made them louder. That was when Claire stepped forward. She contacted a lawyer she trusted and shared everything she found. The loan attempts, timing, the false claims, the misuse of Michael's name. The lawyer confirmed what I already feared. This was not just immoral. It was illegal. A financial scheme built on deception, meant to trap my son under the cover of marriage. Once the lawyer became involved, things moved quickly. Formal notices were sent. Investigations began. The evidence was clear and detailed. There was no room to twist the story anymore. Guests who had traveled from across America began to learn the truth. Quiet conversations turned serious. Whispers spread, not about me this time, but about Lauren's family. Why were loans being prepared before vows were even spoken? Why was a house being targeted without the owner's consent? Why was everything so rushed? Lauren disappeared from public view. Her father was placed under investigation. The engagement was officially ended. No wedding photos were ever released because the wedding never truly existed beyond appearances. Michael did not speak to anyone for hours. Then late that night I heard a knock at my door. I opened it to find my son standing on the porch. His eyes were red, his face drawn with shame and pain. For a second he just stood there like he did not know if he was allowed to come in. I stepped aside without a word. As soon as the door closed behind him, he broke down. He cried the way he had when he was small and scraped his knees, deep and uncontrollable. He kept saying he was sorry. Sorry for doubting you. Sorry for listening to lies. Sorry for almost losing himself. I held him, even though my own heart was breaking. I told him that love should never require silence or secrecy. I told him that a real partnership does not begin with traps. That night, as he slept in his old room, I sat alone in the living room. The blue house felt heavy with memories but also steady, like it had always been. The truth had come out not because I shouted, but because lies cannot survive careful light. I knew then that no matter what came next, the worst deception had already failed. Weeks passed after everything fell apart. The noise that once surrounded the wedding slowly faded. Messages stopped coming. The whispers lost their strength. Lies, I learned, cannot survive forever when no one is feeding them. They collapse quietly, one by one, until nothing is left but the truth. Michael moved back into the blue house for a while. The same house he grew up in. The same house that had almost been taken from him without his knowledge. The first night he slept there again, I stood in the doorway of his old room and watched him unpack. Nothing had changed much. The walls were still the same soft color. The window still faced the street where he learned to ride a bike. Seeing him there filled me with a sadness and a peace I could not explain. We began to fall into small routines. I cooked dinner and he washed the dishes. Sometimes we laughed at old memories. Sometimes we sat in silence. Late at night we talked about everything we had avoided for years. He told me how pressure slowly became control. How love turned into fear without him noticing. How easy it was to believe lies when they were wrapped in confidence and charm. He apologized many times. Each time I stopped him. I told him I never stopped loving him. Not for a single moment. I told him love does not disappear because of mistakes. Wait, says. People often asked me if I wanted revenge. They assumed I would. But revenge never crossed my mind. I did not want to see anyone ruined. I only wanted the truth to be known. Once it was, everything else seemed small. I had spent my life fighting quietly, choosing patience over anger. That choice saved us both. The legal matters took time, but they were handled carefully. The house remained protected under the trust. No one could touch it. The attempted loans were stopped completely. Michael's name was cleared. His future was still his own. Every document that once frightened me became proof that preparation and honesty matter. Michael slowly returned to his life. He went back to work. He reconnected with friends who had stepped away during the chaos. Some people apologized to me for believing the wrong stories. Some never did. I learned to accept both. Not everyone deserves access to your peace. One afternoon, Michael sat with me at the kitchen table, the same place where I once held my coffee with shaking hands. He told me something that stayed with me. He said being away from me during that time made him realize how steady my presence had always been. He said I was the one place that never shifted, even when everything else did. That was when I understood something important. I had spent years thinking my sacrifices were invisible. But they were not. They were simply quiet. Quiet does not mean weak. Quiet means strong enough to stand without applause. The blue house felt different after that. Not heavier but calmer. It had survived storms before, and it survived this one too. Walls do not just hold memories. They hold lessons. Michael eventually moved into his own place again. When he left, there was no pain this time. Only pride. He hugged me tightly and said he would never again ignore his instincts. He said he finally understood the difference between love and control. As for me, I returned to my life with a deeper sense of clarity. I stopped apologizing for who I was. I stopped shrinking myself to make others comfortable. I learned that kindness does not require silence when something is wrong. Sometimes being cast aside saves you from something far worse. If I had stayed quiet at that wedding, if I had forced myself to smile and sit in the front row, my son might have walked into a future built on deception. My absence was not a weakness. It was protection. And sometimes, staying home is what reveals everything. The house still stands. My heart still stands. And so does the bond between a mother and her son, stronger than ever, tested and proven by truth.